Saludos cordiales a todos, mi nombre es Walkernobyl y sean bienvenidos a un nuevo video. En esta ocasión estamos en The Stanley Parable o la parábola de Stanley. Es un nuevo juego que traeré al canal que, según la descripción que me indica en internet, es un mod de aventura conversacional creado por el motor Source, desarrollado por David Random y lanzado en julio de 2011. Y la descripción que me indica Steam: es un juego de exploración en primera persona, juegas como Stanley, pero no juegas como Stanley. Seguirás una historia, pero no seguirás una historia. Tendrás una elección, pero no tendrás una elección. Vamos a ver qué tal nos va en esta nueva aventura. Ya saben que después de haber traído Leer el Infierno, está difícil llegarle a los talones a ese tremendo juegazo traído por Tomorrow Corporation. Y vamos a ver con este otro juego si es que llenamos un poquito ahí ese vacío que nos dejó Leer el Infierno. Que si no han visto la serie, ¿qué están esperando? ¿Qué están viendo? Bueno, vean este video y también vayan a ver la serie de Leer el Infierno. Ya saben, el camión del coño. Vamos a ver aquí los logros, que tengo dos logros. Únicamente entré y salí porque quería cambiar el idioma, que ya estaba en español. Muchas gracias por eso. Y bueno, activé los logros. En opciones, vamos a ver si en audio, ok, si está subtítulos, eso también lo cambié. Subtítulos normal y lenguaje de subtítulos español. Dos bocinas y esto ya estaría ok. En video también creo que está todo bien. Y nos vamos a extras, que está activado partidas guardadas y logro. Y ya estaría. Los gráficos no toqué, simplemente ingresé al juego y ya estaría. Comenzar la partida. Vamos a ver qué tal nos va en esta nueva aventura.
This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy.
Ok. Leyeron, yo no leí.
Something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on the monitor for him to follow.
Okay.
No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company
Bueno, pues vete a la casa.
this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and stepped out of his office.
Ok. Pues resulta que éramos unos trabajadores que nos llegaban órdenes y éramos insoportables, algo así, no leí. Error mío, espero que hayan leído y hayan entendido, yo no. Bueno, a la final es que no nos llega ninguna orden y eso es extraño. Y tenemos que salir e investigar. Uy, la sensibilidad, papá. Como que te bajamos un poquito, ¿no? Ay, coño, es esto. Uy, ya te bajaste bastante. Ponte un poquito. Ok. Pues podemos interactuar seguramente.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Vale, nos va narrando como si esto fuera, ¿sabes? Una típica serie.
No
Bueno,
matter how
documental
hard
diré.
Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
Ok. Yo voy a husmear, la verdad. Aunque ya me diga lo que tengo que hacer, no pierdo nada. ¿Aló? Muy buenas. ¿Hay alguien aquí? No. La sensibilidad ahora sigue. Uy, 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 a ver. ¿Por qué brillaba? Ah, creo que es la luz. Un momento, otra vez la sensibilidad. Está muy alta. Ahí. Bueno, ahí está un poco mejor. voy a ver los controles porque, a ver... Editar teclas. WASD, control, agachar. Mouse, usar objeto, vale. Tomar fotos, F5, gracias. Y nada más sería. Sería con esto. Ok. Ahora está muy lento, es que... Coño, de verdad. A ver. Vale, y con esto es para tomar foto, en teoría. Vamos a continuar. I hate Mondays. Ok, yo también odio los lunes. Ay, qué susto, creí que se me cerró, yo mismo lo cerré. Vale. Yo no veo a nadie.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he
Ok.
entered the door on his left.
Entró a la puerta de su izquierda. ¿Y si entró a la derecha? ¿Tú quién coño eres para decirme a dónde tengo que ir? Mira, solo porque me da la gana me voy a la
This
derecha.
was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it
Tal vez
perfectly
quería
well.
pasar...
Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it.
Ajá. ¿Será que me encuentro un cadáver? ¿Quién sabe? ¿Esto es un juego de terror? Me da la sensación.
Yes, truly a room worth admiring. It had really been worth the detour after all, just to spend a few moments here in this immaculate, beautifully constructed room. Stanley simply stood here, drinking it all in.
Vale. Gracias por el dato innecesario.
Yes, really worth it. But eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left.
Ok. ¿Y si no le hago caso? Dice que entre aquí. ¿Y si no le hago caso?
Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't 5 years ago.
Oye. Estoy intrigado. Y dirán, ¿por qué no le haces caso? No le quiero hacer caso. Ajá. A ver.
Look, Stanley, I think perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot here.
Ajá.
I'm not your enemy, really, I'm not. I realize that investing your trust in someone else can be difficult, but the fact is that the story has been about nothing but you all this time. There's someone you've been neglecting, Stanley. Someone you've forgotten about. Please, stop trying to make every decision by yourself. Now, I'm not asking for me, I'm asking for her.
Vale. ¿Qué dicen ustedes?
This is it, Stanley. Your chance to redeem yourself. To put your work aside.
Para que
To let
ella
her
regrese a
back
tu
into
vida.
your
¿Quién es
life.
ella?
She's been waiting.
¿Quién? ¿Quién es ella? Ajá. Ya se me cerró la puerta, coño de la madre. ¿Ustedes qué creen? ¡Ah! ¡Coño!
That's her, Stanley. You need to be the one to do this. To reach out to her. If you can
¿Quién es
truly place
ella?
your faith in another, then pick up the phone.
¿Quién es ella? ¿Alguien me puede decir qué coño es ella? 427. Esa es nuestra oficina, según entiendo.
Is that you? Hold on, sweetie. Sorry to keep you waiting. I'm just pulling the bread out of the oven. All right. Okay, there we go. All right, now, I want you to come in and tell me all about your day.
Oh.
Gotcha. Oh, come on. Did you actually think you had a loving wife who'd want to commit their life to you? I'm trying to make a point here, Stanley. I'm trying to get you to see something. Come inside. Let me show you what's really going on here.
Bueno.
This is a
O la
very
esposa,
sad
no
story
esposa.
about the death of a man named Stanley.
Buenos días, empleado 427. Presione V en su teclado.
Stanley is quite a boring fellow. He has a job that demands nothing of him, and every button that he pushes is a reminder of the inconsequential nature of his existence.
Por favor, presione H.
Look at him there, pushing buttons, doing exactly what he's told to do. Now he's pushing a button. Now he's eating lunch. Now he's going home. Now he's coming back to work. One might even feel sorry for him, except that he's chosen this life.
Para eso quiere que le haga caso, para que me diga que soy un cabeza de huevo que no tiene criterio propio y tiene que seguir órdenes. Y eso es lo que estoy haciendo. Presiono la T.
In his mind, he can go on fantastic adventures. From behind his desk, Stanley dreamed of wild expeditions into the unknown, fantastic discoveries of new lands. It was wonderful. And each day that he returned to work was a reminder that none of it would ever happen to him.
Por favor, presione 1 para mirar TV.
And so he began to fantasize about his own job. First, he imagined that
¿Y
one day
qué televisión?
he stepped up from his desk to realize that all of his co-workers, his boss, everyone in the building had suddenly vanished off the face of the earth. The thought excited him terribly.
Por favor, presione B para pasar tiempo con los muchachos.
So, he went further. He imagined that he came to 2 open doors and that he could go through either. At last, choice. It barely even mattered what lay behind each door. The mere thought that his decisions would mean something was almost too wonderful to behold.
A ver. Me dice televisión, yo no veo ninguna televisión. Esto es un cuadro, esto es un microondas, este es un maniquí. ¿Dónde coño está una pantalla, una televisión? ¿Dónde? Yo no veo nada. 8 para cenar. 8.
As he wandered through this fantasy world, he began to fill it with many possible paths and destinations. Down one path lay an enormous round room with monitors and mind controls. And down another was a yellow line that weaved in many directions. And down another was a game with a baby. And he called it the Stanley Parable.
Presione C para contarle a los niños una historia. ¿Qué niños? Pero no entiendo.
It was such a wonderful fantasy, and so in his head he relived it again, and then again, and again, over and over, wishing beyond hope that it would never end, that he might always feel this free. Surely there's an answer down some new path, mustn't there be? Perhaps if he played just one more time.
Por favor, que la ama.
But there is no answer. How could there possibly be? In reality, all he's doing is pushing the same buttons he always has. Nothing has changed. The longer he spends here, the more invested he gets, the more he forgets which life is the real one.
Por favor, presione 8 para dormir.
And I'm trying to tell him this, that in this world he can never be anything but an observer, that as long as he remains here, he's slowly killing himself. But he won't listen to me. He won't stop. Here, watch this. Stanley, the next time the screen asks you to push a button, do not do it.
Por favor, presione Z para estar en el trabajo por la mañana. Dice que no presionemos y luego dice que sí lo hagamos y que si no le hacemos caso, hacemos lo que nos da la gana, y cuando le hacemos caso dice que no tenemos un criterio propio y somos unos esclavos. Así que, ¿qué coño hay que hacer? Ando más perdido que espermatozoide en la boca. Ando más perdido que espermatozoide ahí en el intestino grueso. Y ahí si presiono otra tecla, J, K, L, O, P, T, I. Dice que no presione la Z. ¿Y qué más puedo hacer si no me deja hacer nada más? ¿Ah? ¿Qué hago? Bueno, no me deja hacer nada más. A la Z.
You see? Can he just not hear me? How can I tell him in a way that he'll understand that every second he remains here, he's electing to kill himself? How can I get him to see what I see? How can I make him look at himself?
Por favor, presione Q para cuestionar nada.
I suppose I can't, not in the way I want him to. But I don't make the rules. I simply play to my intended purpose, the same as Stanley. We're not so different, I suppose. I'll try once more to convey all this to him. I'm compelled to. I must. Perhaps, well, maybe this time he'll see. Maybe this time. And I tried again. and Stanley pushed a button. And I tried again, and Stanley pushed a button.
Ajá, por favor, muera. ¿Saben qué sería curioso? Que el juego acabe aquí. Ajá. ¿Qué coño pasó? No entiendo nada. Ay, se me cerró la puerta.
Simply couldn't handle the pressure. What if he had to make a decision? What if a crucial outcome fell under his responsibility? He had never been trained for that. No. This couldn't go anywhere except badly. The thing to do now, Stanley thought to himself, is to wait. Nothing will hurt me. Nothing will break me. In here I can be happy forever. I will be happy. Stanley waited. Hours passed, then days. Had years gone by? He no longer had the ability to tell. But the one thing he knew for sure, beyond any doubt, was that if he waited long enough, the answers would come. Eventually, someday, they would arrive. Soon, very soon now, this will end. He will be spoken to. He will be told what to do. Now it's just a little bit closer. Now it's even closer. Here it comes.
No estoy entendiendo absolutamente nada. Estoy más perdido. A ver, salgo rápido.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean?
Ok, esto se está repitiendo.
Perhaps he had simply missed a memo. No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
Ajá. Ok, entiendo. Awaiting input. Input receive. Aquí hay algo, no hay nada. A ver esto. Y acá. No entiendo.
Stanley went around touching every little thing in the office, but it didn't make a single difference. Nor did
O sea que si no le hago caso, esto no sigue, ¿no? Eso es lo que me explica, lo que me explicas, eso es lo que entiendo, ¿no?
When Stanley came to a set of two open
Ya,
doors,
entré,
he entered the
sí,
door in his
calla,
hand.
calla. ¿Y qué coño? O sea, ya.
Yet there was not a single person here either.
Ajá.
Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there.
Ok, oficina del jefe. ¿Qué es esto? Vale, aquí no puedo hacer absolutamente nada. A ver. Ajá. Room closet. No, closet no.
Coming
Closet.
to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs
Sí,
to his
sí, sí.
boss's office.
Y aquí no es. Acá. ¿Qué dice? Ah, el baño. Vale. No hay nadie. Esto es la oficina, supongo, ¿no?
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. Shocked, unraveled, Stanley wondered in disbelief who orchestrated this. What dark secret was being held from him? What he could not have known was that the keypad behind the boss's desk guarded the terrible truth that his boss had been keeping from him. And so the boss had assigned it an extra secret PIN number. 2845.
2845.
But of course, Stanley couldn't possibly have known this.
$28.45. A ver, vamos a ver. Ah, aquí.
Stanley just sat around twiddling his thumbs, trying to input any, yet incredibly, by simply pushing random buttons on the keypad, Stanley happened to input the correct code by sheer luck. Amazing. He stepped into the newly opened passageway.
Vale. Ok, o sea, hay que hacer caso. Vale. aparte del maniquí, hemos estado absolutamente solos. Vale.
Descending deeper into the building, Stanley realized he felt a bit peculiar. It was a stirring of emotion in his chest, as though he felt more free to think for himself, to question the nature of his job. Why did he feel this now, when for years it had never occurred to him? This question would not go unanswered for long.
Porque no quiero. Vale. Uy. Pues qué bonitos túneles. Instalaciones de control mental. Escape. No. Créanme que me encantaría irme por ahí. Miren, pero no. Luego no entiendo la historia. Vale, sigamos. Y... ñéngale.
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens. What horrible secret did this place hold? Stanley thought to himself. Did he have the strength to find out?
Se abrió esto. Hasta ahora no entiendo lo de agacharse. ¿Para qué? Ajá. Pues es lo único que hay.
Now the monitors came to life, their true nature revealed. Each bore the number of an employee in the building, Stanley's co-workers.
Dios.
The lives of so many individuals reduced to images on a screen, and Stanley, one of them, eternally monitored in this place where freedom meant nothing.
No se imaginen, realmente esto pasa en la vida real. Pero qué loco, qué estrambólico, qué empleado y los números. Wow. Ok. Bam.
This mind control facility, it was too horrible to believe. It couldn't be true. Had Stanley really been under someone's control all this time? Was this the only reason he was happy with his boring job? That his emotions had been manipulated to accept it blindly?
No estoy entendiendo nada. Ay, Dios mío.
No. He refused to believe it. He couldn't accept it. His own life in someone else's control? Never. It was unthinkable. Wasn't it? Was it even possible? Had he truly spent his entire life utterly blind to the world?
No estoy entendiendo nada.
Proof. The heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions. Happy, or sad, or content. Walking, eating, working. All of it monitored and commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he would dismantle the controls once and for all.
Ajá, aquí hay botones. 5. Cero 521. 0521. Pero no hay 0. Ahí está un 2. Ahí ya estaba el 5. Aquí, ¿qué coño está? El 4. Hay más números. Papá, y ahora. No. Si se dan cuenta, hay un 2. 1, 2. 4, 1, 2, 4, 5. Ajá. ¿Y aquí hay alguien? ¿Algo? Aquí está el 3. Pero no hay 0. Ahí está el 5. Aquí está el 3. Aquí está el 1, 2. Y aquí está el 4. ¿Pero en qué orden debo presionar? Creí que eran esos números que están... Ahí dice 0, 1, 4, 2. 0, 1, 4, 2. Y no hay 0. No hay 0. Es que debe ser en un orden, pero no tengo idea. Y si presiono en este caso el 3, que el 3 estaba acá. A ver. Y el 1 y el 2. Ajá. Ah, no, el 2 y el 1. Pues no hace nada. Pues no sé cuál es el orden. No tengo idea. Y aquí hay otros botones. System Power. On, off.
And when at last he found the source of the room's power, he knew it was his duty, his obligation, to put an end to this horrible place and to everything it stood for.
On u off. ¿Cuál de los dos? Off. Ok. ¿Aló? El juego que más me ha...
Blackness and a rising chill of uncertainty. Was it over? Yes. He had won. He had defeated the machine. Unshackled himself from someone else's command. Freedom was mere moments away. And yet, even as the immense door slowly opened, Stanley reflected on how many puzzles still lay unsolved. Where had his co-workers gone? How had he been freed from the machine's grasp? What other mysteries did this strange building hold? But as sunlight streamed into the chamber, he realized none of this mattered to him. For it was not knowledge or even power that he had been seeking, but happiness. Perhaps his goal had not been to understand, but to let go.
Esto es falso, ¿no?
No longer would anyone tell him where to go, what to do, or how to feel. Whatever life he lives, it will be his. And that was all he needed to know. It was perhaps the only thing worth knowing. Stanley stepped through the open door.
Hacia la puerta abierta. Es lo único, ¿no? Pero esto es falso. Ah, es real.
Stanley felt the cool breeze upon his skin. The feeling of liberation.
No estoy entendiendo nada. No entiendo.
This was exactly the way, right now, that things were meant to happen. And Stanley was happy.
Logro desbloqueado. Completar el juego. ¡Ah! ¡Ah, es en serio! Ya decía yo. Pues no se acabó el juego. Esto sigue.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps
The end is never.
No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't
Eso
find
no
a
estaba
trace
antes,
of his
según yo.
co-workers.
Pero me dieron ese logro. ¿Se dieron cuenta? The end is never. Uy, miren. Awaiting input. ¡Oh! Ok, input receive. Interesante. Estoy... No sé si estoy haciendo algo, ¿sabes? Algo que ayude. Vale, otra vez a la izquierda. Porque a la derecha no me sirvió de nada. Vale. Y otra vez a la oficina. O sea, según voy avanzando en este bucle, voy completando las cosas. ¿Qué cosas? No tengo idea. A ver. Y obviamente las cosas van cambiando, ¿no? Miren. Because the boss knows that what the boss says goes. If the bosses suffer losses, that's what the boss chose. Ajá. No sé si podía entrar antes. Error por no revisar. Pero bueno. Curioso. ¿Y aquí puedo entrar? Ah, sí puedo entrar. Business Strategy. Ok. Ah, coño. Que puedo ir por aquí. ¿Me voy? Vamos a ver. Eso sí, estoy perdido, la verdad. Estoy... Si ustedes están perdidos, yo estoy más perdido todavía. Pero me está gustando. No entiendo nada, pero me está gustando. Ah, coño. Ah, muy bien. Sigo en el mismo lugar. Arriba. No. Arriba. Coño, en el mismo lugar sigo. Arriba. A ver, para abajo. Porque para arriba no hace nada. Ah, bueno. Pues no sé si funciona o algo, pero no quiero perder más tiempo. Así que vamos a continuar por donde íbamos, que era aquí, y a repetir el bucle. ¿Y será que es lo mismo? 28, 45. Sí, es lo mismo.
That kind of anxiety isn't helpful, so he relaxed for a few moments with some calming New Age music.
New Age. Oye, cuidado, si esto es copyright, cabrón. Ay, hasta. El juego es demasiado inteligente, ¿sabes? Quiero ver si... Un momento, lo de los subtítulos siento que está muy pequeño. No sé si eso puedo subirlo. No, ¿dónde estaba? Audio, subtítulos, normal, descriptivos.
Omni walked forward. Stanley simply began entering random codes into the keypad, knowing full well the sheer statistical unlikelihood that this would ever result in...
Pues no entiendo. Audio desactivado, subtítulos normal. Quería ver si los subtítulos podían estar... Pero no, bueno. Esto ya lo vimos. Me dio mucha risa, sinceramente, que haya dicho: ah, está tan apurado que no deja que el narrador termine. Oye, muy buen juego. Muy buen juego. Estamos progresando sin tener idea de qué hay que hacer.
It was a stirring of emotion in his chest, as though he felt more free to think for himself, to question the nature of his job. Why did he feel this now, when for years it had never occurred to him? This question would not go unanswered for long.
Vale. Uy, esto es todo... ¿Cómo?
Stanley walked straight ahead through the large door that read Mind Control Facility.
¿Y si nos vamos por acá? No sé, es que luego cambia la historia y no progreso. Dale. Ñénguele.
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens.
Sí, esto ya lo vi.
What horrible secret did this place hold? Stanley thought to himself.
¿Qué dice? No leo. Dale. Es que como esto ya pasamos, quiero ir directamente al grano.
Now the monitors jumped to life, their true nature revealed. Each bore the number of an employee in the building, Stanley's co-workers, the lives of so many individuals.
Ahí va subiendo, vamos.
And Stanley, one of them,
que esto ya lo vivimos. Pero esto es muy psicodélico. Y ñénguele. Estoy dando clic a ver si algo cambia. Por el momento no. Dale, let's go. Vamos. Listo. Let's go.
He refused to believe it. He couldn't accept it. His own life in someone else's control? Never. It was unthinkable. Wasn't
Vamos,
it?
vámonos
Was
de
it
aquí.
even possible? Had he
Vámonos de
truly
aquí,
spent his
vámonos de
entire
aquí.
life utterly blind to the world?
Listo. Otra vez estamos acá.
The heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions. Happy or sad or content.
¿Qué dice ahí?
Walking, eating,
No entiendo.
working. All of it monitored and commanded from this very
Activate.
place. And as
No,
the
no
cold
sé qué
reality
dice.
of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he would dismantle the controls once and for
Estoy
all.
presionando todos los botones. ¿Y aquí pasa algo si bajo? ¿Va? No. Y no hay el 0. Seguramente... A ver. No puedo hacer nada. No hay el 0 como para decir, haz esto. Pues... Ajá. Activate power. No sé qué es eso. ¿Y acá? Pues no. No sé qué hay que hacer. ¿Puedo seguir subiendo? Creo que sí, creo que sí. A ver, denme un momento. Porque arriba hay algo, acabo de darme cuenta. ¿Y cómo puedo subir allá? ¿O no puedo subir y estoy loco? Creo que estoy loco. Bueno, pues continuemos por donde íbamos. A repetir lo mismo, a ver si algo cambia. Esto estaba antes. Curioso. Uy. No me deja hacer nada. Seguramente si hiciera una mezcla de botones. Pero no tengo idea. Porque no hay el 0 como para decir 0521 o 0142 o la moto del coño. Bueno, vamos a ir otra vez por acá. Y aquí no hay algo. ¡Oh! Me asusté. Otra vez esta escena que ya la vivimos.
Stanley stepped through the open door.
Bueno, no hay algo más. Momento. Pues no. No te deja ir por otro lado.
Felt the cool breeze upon his skin, the feeling of liberation, the immense possibility of the new path before him. This was exactly the way, right now, that things were meant to happen. And Stanley was happy.
Bueno, y pues otra vez estamos aquí. ¿Algo cambió? Según yo, no.
But Stanley simply couldn't handle the pressure.
Ay, no puedo salir.
What if he
Otra
had to make
vez,
a
no puede
decision?
ser.
Except
Otra vez
badly.
la charla
The thing to
del
do
coño.
now, Stanley thought to himself,
Ayúdenme.
Nothing
Quiero salir
will
de
break.
aquí.
Nothing
Quiero
will
salir de
break
aquí,
me.
no me
In
dejan.
here I can be happy. Here it comes.
¡Upa! ¿Qué pasó aquí? Ahora sí hubo cambio.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it
A
mean?
ver, computadoras.
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo. No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
Ajá. Curioso. Computadora. A ver, input. Uy, se reseteó. Creo que hice algo mal.
Stanley went around touching every little thing in the office, but it didn't make a single difference, nor did it advance the story in any way.
Pues en teoría todo sigue igual, ¿no?
When Stanley came to a set of
Ay,
two
otra vez a la
doors,
izquierda.
he entered the door on his left.
Ajá. ¿Será que alguna puerta se abre y me salté?
Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief,
Sí.
Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find... Stanley stepped into the broom closet, but there was nothing here, so he turned around and got back on track.
Bueno, si tienes razón, no hay nada. Bueno.
There was nothing here. No choice to make, no path to follow. Just coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his
Ajá,
boss's
sí, estoy
office.
caminando hacia arriba. A ver. Estoy viendo si algo cambia. Un
But
auto.
Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss, admitting he had left his post during work hours. He might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. All of my co-workers blinking mysteriously out of existence in a single moment for no reason at all. None of it made any logical sense. And as Stanley pondered this, he began to make other strange observations. For example, why couldn't he see his feet when he looked down? Why did doors close automatically behind him wherever he went? And for that matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Were they simply repeating? No, Stanley said to himself, this is all too strange. This can't be real. And at last, he came to the conclusion that had been on the tip of his tongue. He just hadn't
Sí, muy chistosito y todo. Chistosito.
He yelled. This is all a dream. Oh, what a relief Stanley felt to have finally found an answer, an explanation. His co-workers weren't actually gone. He wasn't going to lose his job. He wasn't crazy after all. And he thought to himself, I suppose I'll wake up soon. I'll have to go back to my boring real-life job pushing buttons. I may as well enjoy this while I'm still lucid. So, he imagined himself flying and began to gently float above the ground.
Auxilio.
Then he imagined himself soaring through space on a magical starfield, and it too appeared. It was so much fun, and Stanley marveled that he had still not woken up. How was he remaining so lucid? And then perhaps the strangest question of them all entered Stanley's head. One he was amazed he hadn't asked himself sooner. Why is there a voice in my head dictating everything that I'm doing and thinking? Now the voice was describing itself being considered by Stanley, who found it particularly strange.
Ay, Stanley, ¿qué te pasa, Stanley? ¿Quién te manda a drogarte, hijo mío?
He thought. And while he thought it all very odd and wondered if this voice spoke to all people in their dreams, the truth was that, of course, this was not a dream. How could it be? Was Stanley simply deceiving himself? Believing that if he's a...
Me estoy volviendo loco, les juro. Ya deja el bucle. Coño de la madre, me estoy desesperando.
Now, hearing the voice speak these words was quite a shock to Stanley.
Como está en inglés, shut up. Shut up.
Did the voice not see him float and make the magical stars just a moment ago? How else would the voice explain all that? This voice was a part of himself too. Surely, if he could just... He would prove it. He would prove that he was in control.
Ya no voy a hacer nada más, solo voy a caminar.
So he closed his eyes gently, and he invited himself to wake up. He felt the cool weight of the blanket on his skin, the press of the mattress on his back, the fresh air of a world outside this one. Let me wake up.
Sí, ¿por qué no me dejas vivir mi vida y seguir aplastando A, Z, V y se acabó?
I wish it to be over. Let me go back to my job. Let me continue pushing the buttons. Please.
Justo lo que decía.
I want my apartment and my wife and my job. All I want is my life exactly the way it's always been. My life is normal. I am normal. Everything will be fine. I am okay.
¿Tú estás bien? Bueno, chévere por vos, pero yo no. No, otra vez no puede ser.
Stanley began screaming. Please, someone, wake me up. My name is Stanley. I have a boss. I have an office. I am real. Please, just someone tell me I am real. I must be real. I must be. Can anyone hear my voice? Who am I? Who am I? And everything went black.
Gracias. Gracias.
This is the story of a woman named Mariella. Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She arose, got dressed,
Muy bien por
gathered her
ella.
belongings, and went to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. And although she would soon turn to go call for an ambulance, for just a few brief moments, she considered the strange man.
Vale.
He was obviously crazy. This much she knew. Everyone knows what crazy people look like. And in that moment, she thought to herself how lucky she was
Sí,
to
claro.
be normal.
Bien.
I am sane. I am in control of my mind. I know what is real and what isn't. It was comforting to think this, and in a certain way, seeing this man made her feel better. But then she remembered the meeting she had scheduled for that day. The very important people whose impressions of her would affect her career, and by extension, the rest of her life. She had no time for this, so it was only a moment that she stood there, staring down at the body. And then she turned and ran.
Qué buenos datos te aventaste. Pero, ¿nadie te preguntó? Otra vez estamos aquí. Ok. Voy a dejar aquí el video. Ay, ya fue mucho bucle. Ya, muy bueno, muy lindo el juego, pero me voy a volver loco. Así que mejor calma. Dejemos esto aquí. Vamos a continuar, obviamente, porque el juego está increíble. A pesar de no entender realmente qué hay que hacer, me gusta poder avanzar. Es como cuando das un examen. No tienes ni idea, porque no estudiaste, obviamente, y te va bien. Algo así estamos haciendo. No tenemos ni idea de lo que es, y sin embargo le estamos atinando a las cosas. En teoría, porque supuestamente nos saltó un logro que terminamos el juego, ¿no? Pero bueno, vamos a ir viendo con el pasar de los episodios. A ver en qué mismo quedamos. Y voy a dejar aquí, ya. Voy a guardar la partida. Termino el video. Bueno, al revés. Termino el video, guardo la partida y me salgo porque mucha parábola de Stanley que voy a salir loco de aquí si sigo jugando esto. Así que nada, espero que este video les haya gustado. Si es así, no olviden dejar su grandioso me gusta, comentar qué tal les pareció este video si quieren que traiga más. De Stanley Parable, GTA 5, Minecraft, Red Dead Unturned, PC Building Simulator, cualquier juego me lo hacen saber en la caja de comentarios. Y si este tipo de contenido te gusta, suscríbete que eso me ayudaría bastante. Yo aquí ya me despido por hoy. Gracias por ver, que tengan un buen día. Walker desaparece.